Hello everyone. Today we're talking about a very special helicopter, the Mi-24, known as the Hind or Satan's Chariot for some.
There's just something about the Mi-24 Hind helicopter. Maybe it's the way it looks, like a heavily armed predator eagerly waiting to strike. Or maybe it's what it represents, the threat of the power of the Soviet military during the Cold War. Either way, even Tom Cruise would agree, when you hear that unmistakable rotor thumping in the distance, it's your cue to start running.
The helicopter is called the Hind. Its normal designation is the Mi-24, Mi-24. The Hind is the NATO name for the aircraft. All helicopters start with an H from the word helicopter. A bomber starts with a B, like a Badger. And Mi-23, Flogger, is a fighter, so it starts with an F. The aircraft has a couple of nicknames. In Russia it's known as the Crocodile. This stems mostly of its camouflage pattern. In Afghanistan, when it was used successfully, it was known as the Satan's Chariot. And colloquially, sometimes it's known as the Flying Tank because why? It's a beast of an aircraft.
The story of the Mi-24 begins in the 1960s, as the Soviet Union studied helicopter warfare in Vietnam and realized the need for a powerful multi-role combat helicopter. American concepts distinguished between troop carriers and dedicated gunships, but Soviet engineers, under the legendary helicopter designer Mikhail Mil, sought a single platform combining both roles. The design bureau drew heavily on the earlier Mi-8 transport helicopter, using its dynamic components and engines as a base, but modifying the cockpit and adding substantial weapons and armor. The prototype for the new helicopter, initially known as the V-24, first flew in September 1969. The Mi-24 was formally introduced in 1972, quickly recognized as the Soviet Union's first purpose-built assault helicopter. The Mi-24 could carry up to 8 fully equipped paratroopers, in addition to its standard crew, making it unique among major attack helicopters. Early versions had a side-by-side cockpit. Later, the Mi-24D introduced a tandem front-rear arrangement, improving survivability and combat effectiveness. The aircraft was designed to perform fire support, anti-armor, and rapid troop insertion or extraction missions.
We're inside the Hind cockpit at the moment. This is the pilot's compartment, where we have the standard helicopter controls. You have the cyclic and the collective, and of course all instruments needed for flight. The pilot has a limited ability to operate weapons. We have a weapons operator, and he sits in front of the pilot. All the switches and instruments inside the cockpit are controlled by the pilot. We also have a flight engineer or technician that can sit to the back of the pilot, and he sits on a little bar stool, a little milking stool. The problem with the flight engineer is he has to be a small guy because he has to climb inside the small corridor and change blown fuses or activate some switches that the pilot cannot reach while in flight. The standard controls in the cockpit are the collective and the cyclic. We also have the foot pedals for rotational purposes on the helicopter. We also have, as this is a retractable landing gear, we have the retractable landing gear lever here. The problem is, I could explain everything to you, but it's in Russian. So I can't read Russian. So here we're seated in the gunner's cockpit, and we have controls for the main gun in front of him, and we have controls for the missiles that are mounted on the pylons externally. These are guided by the gunner. he has to sit in this position, look through the optics that protrude through the bottom of the aircraft, of the fuselage, and then control the missile while flying to its target. It's a very different way of going about the problem of targeting a tank or something else. He has the gunner has a limited control over the whole aircraft, so he has a cyclic and a collective, and foot pedals, of course. If by any chance the pilot has been incapacitated, he can take over basic flight of the aircraft. The Russians, they like to reuse items and not invent new stuff if it's not necessary. For example, the air conditioning that the gunner has as well as the pilot is a little fan that blows air into his face, and this fan is also used in other aircraft and even in tanks. The whole cockpit on the lower side is armored with armor plating made of titanium. The front window that the gunner looks through is also rated for light armor, and the side windows are made of plexiglass. So the gun is controlled by this piece of equipment. So it has a small HUD, head-up display, and the gunner controls the main gun in the front from this console. The firing of the gun is through this little lever here. So what we have here is the ammunition box where the 12.7 millimeter ammunition goes to feed the main gun in the front. So when it's full, when you have loaded all the ammunition, you can close it by winding It goes through chutes through the structure here, goes to the main gun, to the main gun, which is a type of Gatling gun, has 4 barrels and has a firing rate of about 4,500 rounds per minute. When the weapons operator, when he uses his missile guiding system, when he looks through his optics, the optics go through here, through this port, and this is where he looks and he follows the missile while it's going to its target, and so he can adjust the trajectory of the missile. Here we have a detection system for the flare system, a pitot tube, and another pitot tube with vanes for wind direction and speed. There was a version of the helicopter, don't ask me which one, because I don't know the designated letters. They have the D, the PV, or whatever. They had a version that had a double 30mm cannon on the side, built on the side here. The problem with that was that it gave too much trouble to the structure of the aircraft. It was too damaging. The recoil was too heavy. On our version, we have 2 rocket pods mounted on each side. They can be exchanged for example, a double-barreled gun pod. That's 23 millimeters. Here we have 2 rails for the missile system. We can have 4 missiles on the aircraft, 2 on each side. These are the missiles that are guided by the gunner in the front through his optic system that I showed you earlier. So when the missiles are installed on the rails, they are pushed into these connection points for the guidance system on the missile. This is the external gun pod that can also be mounted on the Hind. In this case, it's mounted on our Mi-23, but it's identically the same 23mm gun pod. So here we are inside of the Hind cargo compartment. It's a multi-role helicopter, so which means the cargo can be used, for example, in this configuration as it is now, to transport 8 troops into the combat zone. It also has a capability to have medical evacuations or cargo transport. The aircraft also can transport cargo from a sling and a hook beneath the aircraft itself. We have a couple of different things. For example, we have removable or openable windows, and the windows click into the roof of the helicopter, which can use a mount like this. And what does this mount do? It helps the troops inside of the helicopter to put their weapons inside, so they have a firing. They can fire to potential enemies on the sides of the aircraft, and they won't shoot this way when it's clamped inside. When it's clamped, they can't shoot into the helicopter itself. When the guys here in the back are firing and they are being fired upon, normally in front of them there's also a protective plate which is not present here. It clicks into these eyelets. Two of the weapons that can be associated with the Hind. This is a AK-47 with underfolder that we can use to clamp into these clamps on the door, so they can the troops in the back can shoot outside without shooting the inside of the helicopter itself. This is an AK-47, as I told you. This one is in caliber 7.62 by 39. It shoots fully automatic or semi-automatic or safe. Of course, we're here in a museum. All weapons are empty and inert. This is an AK-74U. This rifle was used by the crews on the Hind. They had it in a kind of holster against their leg. So you see it's a little bit larger than a classic pistol, but they used it. And this rifle was also used by Osama bin Laden. It was his favorite rifle. When you see any picture of him with a rifle against the wall next to him, it's this rifle. This rifle is in 545 × 39. The difference is, with a classic AK, it has a booster because the barrel is not long. So to have a decent recoil for the action, they made a booster so the gases are trapped a little bit longer, so they can travel through the gas system and reset the system. So both pilots, they are protected by the titanium tub that sits below them and around them. It protects them against small arms fire from the ground. That's why it's known. The helicopter is known as the flying tank. It's a very robust airframe. We have two engines. Why? Because of redundancy as well. In front of the engines you can see two deflectors. They are mainly there to prevent ingress of foreign debris, so that it doesn't damage the engines. Both engines, depending on which variant of helicopter and when it was built, they have about 1800 to about 2200 horsepower per engine. The gear is retractable, so we have the main landing gear and the nose landing gear. It all retracts into the airframe. We have two wings on either side of the helicopter. The main use is to hang stores of ammunition like the gun pods, the rocket pods, the missiles. The secondary function is that they give lift to the airframe as it flies. So with all the options that are inside the airframe, outside of the airframe, when it's empty, it's about 8,500 kilos. When it's fully loaded, it's about 12,500 kilos. This is the battery compartment. So to open it, you have to open it with a screwdriver. And inside you find a box. And in this box, the batteries are placed. And then there's a connection to the aircraft when you put everything back inside. This is where you install the flares. When the system detects a signal, you can fire off flares to protect against heat-seeking missiles. So here we have external power connections and hydraulic connections for probably for testing and things like that. So as you can see, we have two Hinds in our collection. This one is in the museum and the other one is in storage. As you can see, they came from the East German Air Force. After the unification, the aircraft flew in the German Unified Luftwaffe, and in '95 they were gifted to us, to the museum. Here you can see the remnants of the emblems of the Luftwaffe. They removed those. I don't know when, I don't know where, I don't know who.
The Mi-24 Hind D helicopter has participated in numerous conflicts since its introduction in the 1970s. Its first combat use was by Ethiopia during the Ogaden War against Somalia in 1977. The Mi-24 gained international notoriety during the Soviet-Afghan War of 1979 till 1989, where it was heavily used by Soviet forces for close air support and ground assault operations. In Afghanistan, the Hind D earned the nickname Satan's Chariot due to its formidable firepower and armor, but it eventually faced significant losses against US-supplied Stinger missiles. Soviet Mi-24 pilots became legendary for solo-style aggressive flying. They would dive into narrow valleys, sometimes alone or with just one wingman, to attack Mujahideen positions. They would enter a valley at high speed, pop up briefly to fire rockets, and draw back below ridgelines before return fire. During the Cold War, it was stationed across Eastern Europe for rapid response in case of any NATO Warsaw Pact conflicts. The Mi-24D, often in export designation as Mi-25, fought in the Iran-Iraq War, Ethiopia, Sri Lanka, Angola and Nicaragua among others. It was also employed in Chechnya, both Russia-Georgia conflicts and numerous anti-insurgency operations. Even in the current war between Russia and Ukraine, the Hind is still deployed by both sides. In the early days of the conflict in 2022, two Ukrainian Mi-24s flew at treetop low-level altitude across the border into Russia. They prevented detection by nap-over-the-earth flying, following the terrain and keeping a low altitude to avoid being seen. They struck a fuel depot in Belgorod using rockets and escaped before their surprised enemy could react. The Hind was involved in the only known dogfights between helicopters. These occurred in the opening days of the Iran-Iraq War of 1980, when Iran fielded an export version of the Sea Cobra and Iraq the Mi-25 export version. Both helicopters were tasked with engaging ground targets and armor columns, but occasionally bumped into each other. Clashes between these heavily armed helicopters occurred at low altitude and were fast and brutal. Finding accurate results about the outcome is difficult due to exaggerated results in propaganda, but it is clear that both sides managed to take down several helicopters. The Mi-24 served as the foundation for numerous upgrades and variants. Modernized Hinds, such as the Mi-35M, offer advanced avionics, night attack capabilities, and wider weapon flexibility, keeping the helicopter relevant for modern conflicts. More than 2,300 units were built, many of which are still in service. At least 1,250 remain with post-Soviet states alone. As of today, around 52 countries still use the Hind.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video on this impressive aircraft. And if you have any other suggestions or ideas, put them in the comments and we will make a video about it. If you like to see this impressive aircraft for yourself, come and visit us at the museum. You're more than welcome.
Ставьте ноги вместе. Выполняем поочередные движения плечами вверх, приседая и выпрямляя.